In the heart of Kenya's perilous Tsavo National Park, a rookie ranger defied all odds to achieve the unthinkable. Amidst the skeptical gazes and mocking words of his seasoned colleagues, Kweku bravely plunged into saving a severely injured hyena, disregarding the threat from the wild creature itself. But what left the entire ranger station in disbelief was the hyena's subsequent action, a mystery that makes one wonder, could there be something beyond instinct between man and beast? Tsavo National Park in Kenya is a vast land where nature reveals its raw beauty and unforgiving harshness. Endless dry savannas, stained red by the dust under the scorching sun, are interspersed with dense, thorny bush forests where the rustling leaves blend with the roars of wild beasts. Under the shade of towering acacia trees, herds of elephants move silently, while the sharp eyes of leopards lurk in the shadows. But Tsavo is not just a home for wildlife. It is also a silent battlefield between ruthless poachers and the rangers who protect this land day and night. In this challenging landscape, Kweku, a 24-year-old Kenyan, embarked on his journey as a novice ranger. Born in a poor village on the park's edge, Kweku grew up amidst tales of lions and the howling winds across the savannah. He carried a burning love for nature, but his experience was almost non-existent. He had no formal training, only passion and a desire to protect the land he called home. However, reality did not match Kweku's dreams. Instead of patrolling treacherous trails with a rifle or confronting poachers, he was stuck with menial tasks, sweeping the dusty ranger station, washing the grimy jeeps, or cleaning the foul-smelling veterinary pens. His colleagues, veteran rangers with sun-tanned skin and cold eyes, often looked down on him. "You know nothing, kid," they would say, their voices dripping with disdain. "Tsavo is no place for dreamers." Kweku endured in silence, but inside, the flame of determination still burned. He believed that one day he would prove his worth. One sweltering morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon, Kweku was sweeping near the station's fence when a strange sound echoed from afar, a faint, fragile moan, like the last breath of a creature on the brink of exhaustion. He stopped, listening intently, his heart pounding. The sound was unlike the wind rustling through the dry grass or the leaves whispering. It carried a vague sense of pain. Rushing to report it to his colleagues, Kweku was met with mocking glances and scornful laughter. "It's just the wind, kid," one said, waving dismissively. "If you can't tell the difference between natural sounds, how can you be a ranger?" They turned their backs, leaving him with a gnawing doubt. But Kweku couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Was it an injured animal, or something more dangerous lurking nearby? Despite the ridicule, he couldn't ignore it. With an old flashlight in hand, Kweku took a deep breath, stepped over the fence and ventured into the vast wilderness of Tsavo, where fate awaited him. The night in Tsavo carried a strange beauty, but was steeped in danger. The pale moonlight filtered through thin clouds, casting jagged shadows of trees that stood like silent ghosts. Kweku gripped his old flashlight tightly, its flickering beam threatening to die at any moment. He knew he shouldn't leave the station alone, especially at night, but that faint, pitiful moan echoed in his mind, refusing to let him rest. With his heart pounding, he stepped over the fence and ventured deeper into the wilderness. Each step Kweku took was cautious, his ears straining to catch every sound. The chirping of insects, the rustling of leaves beneath his feet, and in the distance, the howl of a jackal. But then he heard it again, the soft, pained moan, closer now than it had been during the day. He aimed his flashlight ahead, and in its weak glow a sight froze him in place. A female hyena lay curled beside a bush, her hind leg ensnared in a steel wire trap set by poachers. The wire cut deep into her flesh, blood pooling beneath her on the ground. She panted heavily, her eyes reflecting pain and exhaustion. Kweku's heart clenched. He knew hyenas were fierce creatures, but in this moment she was simply a being in agony. He approached slowly, his hands trembling. He had to do something, but he couldn't free her alone. He needed help. Turning back, he rushed to the duty room where Musa, the veteran ranger, sat by an old radio. "Musa, I found a hyena caught in a trap near the western fence," Kweku said urgently. "She's badly injured. We have to save her." Musa looked up, his gaze sharp and cold. "You left the station alone? At night? Do you even know what you're doing?" His voice dripped with anger. "And now you want to save a hyena?" Those scavengers aren't worth the risk. But she's in pain, Kweku tried to explain. If we don't help, she'll die. So what? Musa stood, towering and stern. Who do you think you are, a real ranger? You're just a clueless kid. I forbid you from doing anything with that animal. If you dare, I'll report you to the higher-ups. Kweku felt as though he'd been slapped. He wanted to argue, but Musa's words pressed heavily on his chest. Just then a few other colleagues entered, catching the tail end of the conversation. Saving a hyena? Ha! He's crazy, one sneered. He probably thinks he's some kind of hero. Don't waste your time, kid, another chimed in. You don't even know how to hold a gun properly, and you're talking about rescuing a wild beast? Kweku stood there, his ears ringing from the mockery. He glanced at Zawadi, the veterinary intern, standing quietly in the corner. She bit, her lip, her eyes flickering with concern, but she remained silent. Kweku understood. She couldn't risk helping him openly, fearing the consequences. He turned and walked out of the room, his heart heavy. But in his mind, the image of the suffering hyena lingered, haunting him. He couldn't abandon her. Even if it meant facing punishment, he had to do what he believed was right. The full moon over Tsavo was shrouded by thick clouds, leaving the night dark and cold. Kweku stood in the open field, clutching a worn machete and a small pair of pliers he'd taken from the ranger station. Before him lay the trapped hyena, her leg constricted by the wire until it bled. Her faint whimpers carried on the wind, urging him to act. With no one to assist and no time to wait, he had to free her himself. Kweku knelt down, placing the flashlight beside him to light the scene. He carefully clamped the pliers onto the wire, but it was tougher and sharper than he'd expected. He pulled with all his strength, sweat beading on his forehead. Suddenly, a piece of the wire snapped back, slicing deep into his palm. Blood trickled down, dripping onto the dry grass, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to let the pain stop him. The hyena flinched, eyeing him with a mix of fear and suspicion. After several minutes of struggle, the wire finally broke, and her leg was free. Kweku exhaled in relief, but the moment of triumph was fleeting. A low, deep growl echoed from the darkness. He turned around, his flashlight beam catching two glinting spots. A large male hyena approaching, its teeth bared in a threatening snarl. Perhaps it thought Kweku was attacking its mate. A chill ran down his spine, his hand trembling as he gripped the machete. The male hyena crouched low, ready to pounce. In that critical moment, Kweku recalled an old trick. Bright light could scare wild animals. He raised the flashlight, shining it directly into its eyes, and shouted, "Get away, go!" The blinding light made the beast hesitate, stepping back a few meters, but it still growled. Kweku held his ground, slowly backing towards the female hyena until the male turned and fled. Before he could catch his breath, the wind picked up, swirling fine dust and sand. Kweku looked up to see the sky turning pitch black, a sign of an approaching sandstorm. His vision quickly diminished as sand stung his eyes. The female hyena lay there, too weak to move on her own. With no other choice, Kweku pulled a tarpaulin from his backpack, spread it on the ground, and gently lifted the animal onto it. She was heavy, but he gritted his teeth, tied the cloth into a makeshift stretcher, and began dragging her back to the station. Each step was a struggle. The headwind blew fiercely, sand coating his face. He had to shield his eyes with his sleeve, trying to recall the way back through the blinding dust. At times he feared he was lost, but he didn't dare. Stop. The hyena's faint breathing urged him to keep going. As he pulled, he noticed something odd. The trap had a small device attached like a transmitter. A chill ran through him. This was the work of professional poachers. They might be tracking it, and he was dangerously close to them. After an hour of battling the elements, the dim lights of the ranger station came into view. Kweku was nearly exhausted, but managed to drag the hyena into the storage shed behind the station. As he set her down, he heard footsteps. Zawadi, the veterinary intern, emerged from the shadows, holding a bag of antiseptic and bandages. "I saw you leave," she whispered. "Hurry, before we're caught." Kweku was surprised, but quickly took the supplies and began cleaning the hyena's wound. Zawadi assisted, her hands deftly applying the bandages. "Don't tell anyone," she warned. "Musa will be furious if he finds out I helped you." Kweku nodded, his heart warmed by the unexpected support. But the peaceful moment shattered as the shed door swung open. Musa, the station manager, stood there, his eyes blazing with anger. "What are you doing here?" he shouted, striding forward to snatch the bag from Zawadi and confiscate Kweku's machete and pliers. "I forbade you from touching these animals. I'll report this, and you'll be fired." Kweku stood still, feeling as though all his efforts were crumbling. He had risked everything to save the hyena, and now his job, his dream, was in jeopardy. But as he looked at the hyena lying quietly, her wound tended to, he told himself, even if he lost everything, he would have no regrets. In the morning, at the ranger station, harsh sunlight streamed through the gaps in the roof, illuminating the dry earthen floor. Zawadi knelt beside the hyena, her hands gently examining the wound on its leg. Suddenly she stopped, her eyes wide with astonishment. "Kweku," she called softly, her voice trembling. "She's pregnant. This wound is severe. Without special care, neither she nor her cubs will survive." Kweku, standing nearby with his arm still bandaged, felt his heart tighten. He looked at the hyena, her eyes reflecting pain but resilience. "We have to save her," he said firmly. "I will do it." Zawadi nodded, but when she shared the news with the other veterinarians, the atmosphere in the station turned cold. "A hyena? Pregnant?" one scoffed. "Don't waste effort on those scavengers. Let nature take its course." Another vet crossed his arms and shook his head. "We have enough work with the more valuable animals." Kweku clenched his fists, anger rising within him. "She's a living creature too. We can't abandon her just because she's not valuable in your eyes." But his colleagues merely shrugged and turned away. Zawadi bit her lip, her eyes helpless, though it was clear she wanted to help. Musa, the station chief, entered, with a stern face. "Kweku, are you being stubborn again? I told you not to get involved with that animal. If you insist, don't blame me for reporting you to the higher-ups." He paused, giving Kweku a warning look. "You'll lose your job." Kweku stood tall, unwavering. "I will take responsibility. I will care for it, even if I'm alone." Musa sighed, shook his head, and walked away, leaving him with his decision. Indai. The days that followed, Kweku poured his heart and soul into the hyena. He bandaged its wounds, scrounged for suitable food, and set up a warm corner in the storage shed. Zawadi secretly brought medicine, whispering cautions to stay careful. Little by little, the hyena's growls softened, its eyes flickering with a hint of trust whenever Kweku drew near. But peace didn't last. One afternoon, as Kweku was giving it water, the rumble of a jeep engine echoed in the distance. Peering through a crack in the door, he spotted 3 strangers approaching the station, armed with guns and knives. His heart pounded. Poachers. One of them pointed at the shed. "The hyena's in there," he said. "Bait to trap the whole pack." Kweku turned to Zawadi, her face drained of color. "They're using it as bait," he whispered. "We have to protect it." But the poachers had already seen them. One burst in, seizing Kweku by the collar and snarling, "Hand over the beast, kid." He shoved Kweku to the ground, but Kweku sprang up, gripping a wooden stick nearby. "I won't let you touch it," he yelled, raising the stick. Zawadi snatched a fire extinguisher from the wall, poised to assist. Outside, the wind roared, whipping up dust. A sandstorm was rolling in. The poachers seized the chaos, charging forward. Kweku swung the stick, striking one, but another kicked his leg, forcing him to his knees. Zawadi blasted the extinguisher into one man's face only to be shoved back, her head slamming against the wall. Despite the pain, Kweku staggered to his feet. He saw a poacher advancing toward the hyena, knife glinting. With his last surge of strength, he lunged, grabbing the man's leg and yanking him down. A blow from behind darkened his vision. As he faded, he reached for the alarm cord and pulled. A piercing siren cut through the storm's howl. The poachers scattered in panic, vanishing into the swirling sand. Kweku lay still on the floor, blood trickling from his temple. Zawadi crawled to him, shaking him desperately. "Kweku, wake up!" But he didn't stir. From the corner of the shed, the hyena let out a faint, mournful howl, as if sensing its savior's peril, the journey of nurturing. Kweku never imagined his life would intertwine so deeply with a hyena. When he found Shani collapsed by the roadside in Tsavo, her wound seeping blood and her eyes dim with agony, he couldn't abandon her. He named her Shani, miracle in Swahili, because her survival was nothing less. For months, Kweku tended to her with unwavering devotion, dressing her wounds and tearing meat into bite-sized pieces to feed her. At first, Shani growled whenever he approached, But over time she grew to trust him, no longer flinching at his touch. One moonlit night, Shani's sudden sharp whimpers startled Kweku. Panicked, he summoned Zawadi, his secret ally. By the flickering beam of a flashlight, they watched Shani give birth to two fragile cubs, their fur still slick. Kweku stood awestruck. He hadn't just saved Shani, he'd ushered two new lives into the world. He named them Amani and Tumaini, peace and hope, a quiet wish for their future. Raising the trio was no small feat. Kweku worked in the shadows, stealing late-night hours to dodge the scrutiny of his ranger station colleagues. They couldn't fathom why he'd bother with a scavenger like a hyena. Only Zawadi stood by him, slipping him milk, medicine, and tips for nurturing the cubs. "Be careful, Kweku," she'd whisper. "Don't let them find out." With her help, Amani and Tumaini thrived, their coats gleaming, their eyes sparkling with mischief. Shani too regained her strength, her frame sturdy once more, primed for the wild. After more than a year of closeness, Kweku knew the time had come to set Shani and her cubs free. One early morning, with mist still cloaking the Tsavo savannah, he and Zawadi quietly loaded them into the jeep and drove to a remote grassland far from the station. The ride was silent, Kweku's hands clenched on the wheel, his chest tight. He recalled the nights beside Shani, her steady breaths a comfort, and the playful tussles with Amani and Tumaini, moments slipping into memory. They halted in a sprawling grassland, the golden blades aglow in the dawn. Kweku opened the cage, and Amani and Tumaini bolted out, bounding through the tall grass, chasing each other with boundless curiosity. But Shani lingered. She stepped out slowly, her deep brown eyes locked on Kweku. A heavy silence fell, as if she were searching for an answer. Kweku knelt, resting a hand on her head. "Go, Shani," he said, his voice breaking. "This is your home, you need to live free." Shani didn't budge. She pressed her muzzle to his hand, a soft sound escaping her. Tears stung his eyes, but he managed to smile. "You're an amazing mother. Take your cubs." Zawadi watched from behind, her own eyes glistening. After a long pause, Shani let out a resonant howl, summoning Amani and Tumaini. The cubs scampered to her side, and together they ventured into the grassland's depths. Kweku stood rooted, watching until their shapes faded into the sea of grass. His heart cracked, hollow yet full of pride. He'd given them the life they were meant for. Zawadi approached, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "You did good, Kweku," she said softly. "They'll be all right." He nodded, brushing away tears. "I hope so. I'll miss them," she smiled. "They'll miss you too. But this is their place." As the sun climbed, they turned back, carrying a tender tale of compassion and the bittersweet beauty of letting go. 3 years after that pivotal day, Kweku had become an official ranger at Tsavo National Park. Once a passionate but green youth, he'd hardened through months of danger and nature's trials. His old jeep, now a faithful companion, carried him across the sweeping savannas where he patrolled to shield wildlife from human greed. Though his days were consumed by duty, Shani's memory lingered in his heart, the hyena he'd pulled from death's grasp. He wondered if she still roamed the reserve, alive and free. One day, with the sun blazing overhead, Kweku drove through the arid land near the Galana River. The heat shimmered off the cracked earth, and the hum of his jeep was the only sound. Breaking the stillness, suddenly something caught his eye. A faint plume of dust rising in the distance, followed by the dark outline of a truck and a handful of men. Curiosity turned to dread as he drew closer. His stomach churned when he saw it. They were hacking at the horn of a dead rhino, its lifeless body sprawled across the ground, blood pooling crimson on the sun-scorched earth. Without a second thought, Kweku snatched up his radio, his fingers trembling but his voice steady. "Ranger Station, this is Kweku. I've spotted a group of rhino poachers in the western area near the Galana River, requesting immediate backup." Beneath his firm tone, a storm of tension raged. He knew the danger he was stepping into. "Copy that, Kweku. Backup's on the way. Stay safe." Zawadi's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp with concern. He opened his mouth to reply, but before the words could form, a fierce gust of wind slammed across the savannah, whipping up a blinding swirl of dust and sand. It wasn't just wind, it was a sandstorm, the kind every ranger in Tsavo feared, roaring toward him with terrifying speed. In an instant, the world vanished behind a thick, choking curtain of sand. Kweku stomped on the gas, the jeep lurching forward as he fought to outrun the chaos. Sand stung his eyes, flooded his nose and coated his tongue, forcing out ragged coughs. The vehicle skidded wildly, tires spinning uselessly, until it jolted to a stop, swallowed by a deep drift of sand. He slammed his fist against the steering wheel, jabbing at the ignition. The engine whined pitifully, then died. He grabbed the radio again. Nothing but static hissed back. Sand poured into the cabin through every crack, creeping up from the floor, burying his boots. The air thickened, each breath a struggle as the storm pressed in. He pounded on the door, shoving with all his strength, but the wind and sand pinned it shut like an invisible cage. Trapped, his mind raced to his family. To Zawadi's worried voice, to Shani, the hyena he'd once pulled from a snare. Am I going to die here? The question clawed at him as his vision blurred, his eyelids growing heavy, consciousness slipping into the dark. Then, a piercing howl sliced through the wind's furious roar. Kweku flinched, his heart pounding. A trick of the mind, he thought, shaking his head. But the sound sharpened, drawing nearer, and the jeep trembled with faint vibrations. Something was out there, digging. He squinted through the grimy, sand-streaked window and froze. A familiar shape emerged. Shani, the hyena he'd saved, her claws and snout tearing at the sand around the jeep with frantic determination. Panic surged through him. She's starving, she'll rip me apart. But Shani didn't lunge. She sniffed. The air. Her amber eyes glinting, then threw back her head and unleashed a long, haunting howl. Before Kweku could process it, she spun around and bolted, a streak of fur and muscle racing like an arrow toward the old ranger station. At the station, Shani appeared out of nowhere, howling incessantly and pacing in circles, capturing the attention of the rangers. They watched her with wary eyes, puzzled by what was happening. Zawadi, just finished with her shift, stepped outside and instantly recognized the hyena she and Kweku had once nursed back to health. Noticing Shani's strange behavior, she shouted, "She's trying to tell us something. Kweku might be in danger." Without a moment's pause, she commanded the team to grab a jeep and follow the hyena's lead. Shani took off, guiding them across the savannah at a breathtaking pace, unfazed by the echoes of the sandstorm still swirling in the air. At last they reached Kweku's jeep, now nearly swallowed by the sand. The rangers leaped out, digging with frantic hands, and hauled Kweku from the cabin. He lay unconscious, his lips tinged blue, but a faint, fragile breath still flickered. Within him, Zawadi pulled him close, tears rolling down her cheeks as she watched him slowly stir back to life. Inside the ranger station, Kweku opened his eyes and saw Zawadi at his side. "Shani, did she save me?" he rasped, his voice rough and weak. Zawadi nodded, a tearful smile breaking through. "She led us right to you. If it weren't for her, you'd be—" She didn't finish, but her eyes spoke volumes. Kweku turned his gaze to the window, where Shani had disappeared into the reserve with her pack. He wondered aloud, does she still remember me? Or was it just some miraculous twist of fate? Whatever the truth, he felt a deep gratitude for that miracle. But the relief didn't last long. Out there, the poachers still roamed, lurking in the dark corners of Tsavo, biding their time for the next strike. Kweku's fight was far from over, and he knew he'd need to be more ready than ever. The tale of Kweku and the hyena Shani is more than just a heart-stirring adventure. It carries a profound message about kindness and its rewards. Kweku, a dedicated ranger, didn't hesitate to save a pregnant hyena, a wild creature many would call dangerous. He never imagined that his act of mercy would one day become the thread that pulled him back from the brink, when Shani, the very animal he'd helped, returned to shield him from a deadly sandstorm. The lesson here shines bright. Kindness wields a wondrous power. Even a wild beast, shaped by the harsh laws of survival, can feel love and repay it with loyalty. It's proof that an extraordinary bond can bridge the gap between humans and animals, defying all boundaries. Beyond that, this story mirrors the law of cause and effect. Plant seeds of goodness and you'll harvest life. Sow cruelty and you'll reap ruin. Kweku sowed compassion and was granted survival. The heartless, though, will one day face the cost of their deeds. So I call out to you. Do good even in the tiniest ways. A gentle gesture, a helping hand. These can ripple out and change everything. And never stoop to even the smallest evil, for it doesn't just wound others. It can circle back to cut you down. If this story has touched your heart, subscribe to the Animal Kisa channel for more tales that matter. Hit that like button and Share this video to spread its uplifting message far and wide. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you make of Kweku's choice? Do you believe kindness can transform the world? Together, step by step, we can make this life a little brighter. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next videos.